some of you know me. Actually, yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, sorry. Some of you know me from IC because I graduated in May. But yeah, I did all of those things. I was kind of a little bit everywhere. I love ICTV News and WICB News and everything. I was kind of just living in the park basement. I did intern at CBS News twice in New York City, once in DC, and I interned in Korea with NBC for the Olympics. So a whole bunch of different stuff. I did some event management in New York City, all different things. And fun fact already, even though I just graduated in May, I found an alumni that was news director for ICTV at one point. It was like an alumni bond we had. He was like, I was too. And it was really, so it helps you to be in these programs. But now so I work at WNY. Right now I'm in my office, which is downtown actually. So I'm in the Ithaca Bureau right now. So it's right across from the State Theater. Yeah, so I started working here, kind of crazy to graduate in a pandemic. I know you're all going to school in a pandemic. So I started working here in March freelance because they just needed the extra hands. And then I started working full-time here in June. So I definitely got thrown right into it. I had 1 day of training. I started reporting day 2 because they just needed the hands. And it's been a crazy ride, and just kind of trying to adapt and learn a lot of things. And I know you guys are heading into that right now of trying to report and do all of these things virtually. So if I can help or share anything, I'd love to do that. And also feel free to message in the chat any questions during it. And I can share like my information with Erica and Jay after so they can share it out. Cool. But I don't know. I know Erica and Jay, maybe we're going to guide it with like specific questions or not. I can kind of just go, whatever you guys think.
I think a couple questions at first, and then we'll kind of open it up.
Cool. Yeah.
Well, you kind of touched upon our first question, but it doesn't hurt to revisit it. So as you mentioned, you graduated in May and you literally started right from the get-go. What was that process like adjusting, not just adjusting to like being a full-time reporter, but also like doing it all from home?
Yeah, both crazy. So they actually have, I'm in a group chat now with a lot of other people who are in, sorry, I was getting a phone call. I'm in a group chat right now with a lot of other people who were in the same situation as me, who are, just like thrown into this mix and not sure what to do, and just know that that's okay. Everyone is feeling a little bit of like, I'm not sure what to do right now. I just went to a virtual conference with people who've been reporters for years and years, like top markets, and they aren't even sure what advice to give all the time because everyone is figuring this out. So if you feel ever like you're not sure what to do next, it's okay. Like everyone's figuring it out. But it's definitely, you have to be open to learning every day and just, knowing what you don't know and kind of like even capitalizing on that. Be like, okay, so this week I'm going to work on, this one thing that I can control. Maybe, I can't really get footage of this thing, or I can't, it's frustrating that I can't go interview this person in person, or I can't get B-roll of this because I can't go to their office. But, maybe I can make sure I get a really active stand-up then, or maybe I can make sure I can work really hard to pre-set up my stories for next week that maybe I can get some B-roll in, or I know someone there that can film it on their phone or something like that. So just making little goals for yourself, I found very helpful. And just knowing that like, something that really helped me kind of thrown into it was whatever you're probably wondering or interested in, other people are probably wondering as well about the world. So one of the stories I did recently was about how, because I saw people on Facebook kind of wondering this, and I was wondering this, of what went into Cornell's decision to open, right? So, and it's kind of fun. I can talk about the issues that you guys all are aware of because you're in Ithaca as well. But people were saying Cornell only opened for the money. Like Ithaca made Cornell open for the money, for the economy. Like that's why they opened. And so I was really curious what Cornell had to say about that, what the city had to say about that. Like what was true? Why did Cornell open? It is a big risk. And so I did a piece on that where I talked to local businesses who were impacted by it. I talked to people from the city who said the impact of it. And I talked to Cornell and asked if it, had any impact. And it turns out Cornell said it had no impact in their decision to open, but local businesses said they need it and they probably would have closed otherwise. So kind of adding that emotional aspect, but also, something I was just curious about, and it ended up helping the community a lot because people were curious and posting and questions. So just kind of like learning from each other and whatever you're wondering. I know I ranted a little on that one, but.
Yeah, so kind of going on that, what is your basic process? Am I? Doesn't say I am.
I mean, I can hear you.
Hello?
I can hear you, Jay.
Yeah.
Oh, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, but just kind of going on that, what has your basic process been for, putting together a package or a piece with all these different social distancing, remotely, all these different factors coming into it?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I think the craziest thing coming from college is, so in college, right, you're trying to do classes and other clubs and all these different things, and then you put in a package and try and, stay up late and do it. But when you're doing it full time, I come in at 10, and by 5:30, I have to have one package. By 6, I have to have a different one, and 11, I have another different version. And the whole time I'm going live on social media or posting on social media, and then you do your web copy at the end and kind of engage. So there's, you have, you have all of your time to do it, but there's so much more to do that it's just running with it. So for, when you don't have that video and when you don't have things like that, you gotta just sit there and get creative and think of like, okay, I can incorporate this little thing or this little thing and put a graphic here. And maybe there's this one person I could talk to that I wouldn't normally have, but maybe they could help. That's one of the videos I sent you and Erica. If you guys want to play it now, I can try and screen share, but I don't know audio sharing. I know sometimes that's hard if you're not the host. The one about RAs. So just to intro that one. So there's, right before the semester started, Cornell RAs went on strike because they said they weren't given proper PPE equipment and that there wasn't proper testing, like students were coming in the dorms before getting tested. So there was a big problem about it. And, it was move-in weekend. What were they going to do if all these RAs were on strike? And so with that, I was like, okay, I know I need to do the story. I know it's important, but Cornell won't let me on campus to film. RAs aren't comfortable doing any in-person interviews. They said Zoom only. Some of them wanted to be anonymous because they were worried Cornell would be against them. So I didn't really even have video of all their faces. And it was kind of an uphill battle. Okay, how am I going to do this? So we can watch the video and then go through kind of how I creatively worked around that.
Yeah, just let me know if the sound isn't working or anything like that.
Simmons Rockwell Ford makes it easy to shop, finance, and buy all online. With over 400 new Fords available, you can make car buying simple when you drive your deal at Simmons Rockwell Ford in Hornell, Bath, and Halstead.
Cornell undergraduate resident assistants, also known as RAs, they ended a one-day strike today as they prepare for the official start for students to move in. WENY's Sarah Horbacewicz live in Ithaca to share what their demands to university administration involve. Sarah?
Nick, while the RA strike may have only lasted a day, it was long enough to get attention from university administration. Now, while they're in negotiations today, I got the chance to speak to some RAs yesterday about their demands going forward as we approach move-in weekend.
Cornell's start to the school year typically sounds like this. But this year, it sounds a lot more like this. While it may be a more solitary move-in, some RAs report that Cornell's plan for every student to get a COVID test before entering their dorm wasn't always the case.
I've heard that some of my coworkers have had to interact with residents who have not been tested, people coming from areas that have had a high amount of cases. So I'm very concerned about that because we are on the front lines of this.
With minimal PPE provided to them, some RAs felt they were forced to choose between their own safety and their residents, pushing them to go on strike yesterday.
That in order to serve my residents, I have to expose myself to a potentially life-threatening disease. Just seems unfair to me and unfair to my residents.
RAs had also been working without hazard pay, lacking clear COVID case number or safety violation reporting systems, and with limited guidance on how to support minority communities on campus under COVID. But through it all, their focus remained on their residents.
Ultimately, this is for our residents because we want them to be safe in a time like this.
After gathering hundreds of followers behind their cause in just a day, the university began a dialogue for negotiation. However, Cornell has yet to provide a comment to any of my requests, leaving my start to the fall sounding much like this. But as negotiations continue, one RA reports,
There's no hard feelings, and we're very pleased to start this process with them.
And with that, called off the strike today to communicate with administration as Cornell moves forward with student move-in.
During the strike, RAs did not participate in any training activities, but did continue to help residents as needed. WENY will continue to follow this story and continue to reach out to Cornell for comment as we see more move-in signs like this and approach move-in weekend. Reporting from Cornell University, Sarah Horbacewicz, WENY News.
Yeah, so some of the things to walk through there that I kind of did was the first thing I'm going to tell you is you all have premium Zoom for Ithaca College. Use it to the best of your abilities. I used mine until it expired because with premium Zoom that you don't get with every other Zoom account is you can record the view of gallery view, but also that personal view. So I was able to cut between for B-roll, me talking to all of the RAs, and then for interviews, just that individual shot. And it also transcribes your interviews for you, which is very helpful. So use your premium Zoom while you have it, use it to your advantage. Another thing is you'll notice I had to use a lot of screenshots and scroll throughs. Try to make those as full of motion as possible, zoom in, zoom out, scroll downs, things like that. And there's an effect on Premiere called Gaussian Blur. That is your friend. So what you do there is you just make, it looks cool. When you saw like the blur behind the screenshots, it makes it give that a little more depth to those screenshots and to those file footage that you have to receive because you can't go film things by yourself. And you just layer it with a blur behind it, and it really kind of adds to it, makes it a little more nice to look at. Also use full screen graphics. So I had one of the RAs who didn't want to be shown. So I had a full screen graphic with her quote during that, just to add that B-roll, but then also show it clearly. And then also when I was listing off the demands, use graphics again as your friend. You're not going to get a lot of footage. So if you have to create your own, do it. You guys have great graphics. Natural sound also makes any story really come to life. One advice that I've heard recently from a mentor is kind of people see with their ears, which sounds counterintuitive, but it's very, very true. The more natural sound you can put in there, the better it makes the story really come to life. And with that, it's real. Like, people know you're struggling. People know it's COVID. Show your process. So like at the end of that, I said, listen, I've been trying to reach to Cornell and they're not answering me. I could have just said Cornell didn't reply for comment, right? And ended my package 30 seconds earlier. But instead I was like, no, look, I'm really trying to talk to Cornell. I'm doing my job. And then even just be ready. Those little moments are the best things. So at the end, when I say, and the Cornell RAs called off their strike. They called off their strike, I think, an hour before air. So I had to rewrite everything. And so as I saw the number was calling me, was one of the RAs, I quickly just hit record on my camera so I'd have something to kind of show, instead of just saying, in my tag, the RAs called off their strike, I could show that the RAs are saying, hey, there's no hard feelings, we are calling off our strike. So grabbing any chance you have for visuals is kind of what you got to capitalize on, because you're not going to get a lot of them. You're not going to be able to go there and see a person just in their habitat or even see what it looks like. In that whole story, I couldn't show what a dorm looked like because Cornell, I can't go film on campus because there's no visitors allowed. So definitely grabbing any little chance you see for video, for nat sound, and using it. I lost Jay and Erica.
Okay, no, you're good. So I guess just kind of going off of that too, what is your best advice when you're doing interviews and you're recording at home? Like you talked a little bit about capitalizing on like using Zoom, but what's your best way to get sound, get video when you're at home and you really can't go to the locations, like how you weren't allowed to go to Cornell?
Yeah, so something big that I have learned from other journalists as well that I try to do now is, so you have your camera if you're lucky, or you have a phone, or if you're living at home with siblings that have a phone or parents that have a phone. It's really great to create, again, that depth, because looking at a Zoom, like, yes, it gets the message across, but it's very flat and it's not very interesting to look at. It doesn't seem as emotional or as meaningful. If you could even lean your phone up against your computer and just show that depth, and maybe if you're talking to a doctor, it could be just a like somewhat out of focus medical equipment on the picture of your desktop in the background. But that adds, something else to look at, like, oh, it's a doctor in front of a doctor background. Or I've seen stories where if it's about, let's say, someone, being arrested, someone then went to like a fence and put their phone in front of the fence and then like shot it that way. So it's good to have backups, record it on Zoom, but also if you're recording it the other way, have your camera set up, have your phone set up to record that depth. FaceTime also works because then they're fully in the screen, because I know Zoom like sometimes shows you, and FaceTime won't let you screen record with audio, but you could set your camera up to record that. But just finding, again, like those different ways to display it. If you could put it on a monitor maybe and then film the monitor in front of someone, so it looks like they're a little bit in an office, anything to kind of get creative with it, even with your stand-ups. So I did a story once on a Facebook group, and so it was all virtual. It was Zoom interviews about a website, and I was like, what am I gonna film besides just screen recordings? And so for my stand-up, what I did was I just filmed myself in front of a blank wall, and I put that video in a fake Facebook feed. So it looked like you were scrolling in that Facebook feed, and then my stand-up came up. So just finding ways to like work around what you're given. And I kind of look at it as like a challenge of like, okay, I've got nothing and I'm gonna make something happen at 5:30 tonight. And so kind of finding it's gonna be the best I could do. So just working to incorporate what you do have.
And another point quick on that, what are the best ways to like record VO when you don't have, a studio or a PPEX microphone or any of that sort of thing? What are the best strategies for doing that at home to get the best quality?
Yeah, you would be surprised how well an iPhone works, especially if you have an iPhone 11. I actually use that to go live sometimes even. Because we have like a mobile app. So if I can get creative with that, and it looks really good quality. So if you have one of those, great. If not, just kind of working with what you have. I don't know what everybody has. Also, this sounds weird, but sweaters are your friends, blankets. So if you want to track and there's like room tone, your heating in your house is loud or something like that, throw a blanket over your head and then record, right, like Jay's doing. And throw a blanket over your head and it kind of muffles that sound a little bit. It acts a little bit like an audio booth. It's not perfect, but it's a step. Daylight is also your friend. So if you're recording something earlier in the day, it's very easy to light at home with daylight, because also sometimes, in your room you have like a very yellow light, or, it looks weird, or it's dark, or if you can schedule an interview where there's going to be good daylight, it's very helpful and easy, because then you don't have to like mess with the colors or anything afterwards. And as far as VO, so this might be a Jeremy question for him to go in the school then, but I know that we were starting to work on it when I was there. But from what Ithaca has, like there is file footage, right? Just like generic Ithaca College footage, or I know from past episodes of, let's say, like Newswatch or reports or things like that, there is like footage of the Ithaca Police Department. If you can find those file footages, those are fair game to use. You just put a little bug that says file. especially that's important if you're using footage where people don't have masks on. So we had a reporter who did that recently, and they used old footage, which is totally fair and fine to do when it's just generic footage, but they forgot to put that file bug, and we got a lot of viewer complaints because they thought it was they thought it was students not wearing masks. But really the footage was from a year ago, so it was fine. But like, you have to it's part of that being transparent about your process, right? So it's, okay, it is COVID, we can't go film this, but this is what we have to show you what it would have looked like, or what it did look like, or what we're talking about. Or there are some students that are in Ithaca, maybe just reach out to them and say, hey, can you guys get B-roll of this, this, and this? So like across all platforms, you can use that. Or if you have a friend, or anyone, it's kind of under COVID, everyone's kind of understanding it. So if you're interviewing someone, one time I did a story about a woman, this was back in March, but I did a story about a woman who was making Easter baskets for kids for free in Ithaca because, she wanted everyone to have an Easter, but I couldn't go over her house. So I asked if she could on her phone film her own process. And so I used all of that footage, and she had like her boyfriend film it too. And I just gave credit to her. So use your interviewees as your resources. You're doing a story on them, so they are usually more than happy to help you make them look better. So anything like that is kind of always helpful.
Yeah. On your thing of file footage, I'm putting together a B-roll library so we can use that for file footage. So. But I guess my next question is, you just talked about using your interviews, but what's your best way to get interviews while being remote? Like how do you go about that process, and just in general, getting contacts, not even just remotely?
Yeah, you have to be persistent, because some people it's a lot easier now because, they have more time, and some people it's the exact opposite. Like the health director, you got to be persistent to get an interview with him because he's overtime. So just, it comes with that trying to be creative and work around things, and having a list of, okay, if I can't talk to this person, who am I going to talk to next? And if I can't talk to this person, or how can I kind of frame this story, so that I can, talk to someone. And just, remembering the focus of the story and who it's for. So remembering that I did a story recently on, and I actually have this story to show as well that kind of shows this, but I did a story on how school buses and the transportation companies are adapting under COVID for school this year. And so at first, no one was getting back to me. I called like the Ithaca City School District. I called the transportation department. I called like 3 different union reps. Like I was calling and no one was answering me, and I was getting frustrated. And then I was in the car, and on the radio, I heard that there was an ad for school bus drivers for a job. And so I looked up the ad online, and I called as if I was looking for a job. And I was like, hey, don't hang up. I'm not looking for a job, but I'd really like to talk to you. And they were like, oh, like, okay, let me forward this to my boss. And because it came from someone like within their department, they were then more open to speaking with me, and I got the interview, and I was able to do the story on that. So getting creative with how you're finding, because also, especially for stores and things, their numbers might not be up to date. They might not be in the office. So just like getting creative, using your journalist, stalker, social media skills also. Facebook is a really, really great resource, but to use wisely. I know I use a lot of the Facebook groups in Ithaca, but you have to be very cautious when you use those, because it is a group for them, for locals, and even though we are locals, or I am a local, kind of respecting that, like, I'm a journalist, not always looking for my next story, and that's not how I'm approaching it, but like, rather I'd like to talk with you, and I'd like to, make sure others understand your experience. So if you see, rather than maybe saying like, hey, I know in school groups, it's used a lot for like in class of 2024 or 2022 groups to be like, hey, I'm a reporter for so-and-so doing this. And those are fine every once in a while in local groups, but being cautious as to try to avoid that, but rather listen to what people are posting, and then maybe message someone privately and say like, hey, I saw you posted this and I'm doing a story on this. Would you be interested? And then maybe commenting like, I messaged you. just to kind of respect that and not overwhelm them too, because they're also in a pandemic. But yeah, it comes with like getting creative. And with that school bus story, we can watch that in a second if there's time, if you guys want. I don't really know what time you're on. But focusing that emotional aspect of who is the story for. So instead of focusing the story on here's what the transportation director says school buses are doing this fall. I talked with a school bus driver who's been doing it for years who misses his kids. And it was about like, he misses his kids, but you know what? He gets to see them. It's just going to look a little different. And then I went to the school bus director and she was like, this is how it's going to look. This is how it's going to be. And then I went back to brought it full circle back to the school bus driver who's like, you know what? Like, it's okay that these changes are in place. I feel safe. Not everyone feels that way, blah, blah, blah. Kind of explaining it from a point of view that people can connect with a little more, if that makes sense.
Hey, Sarah, can I ask you a follow-up question on that?
Yeah.
One thing, especially when reporting on tragedies or family deaths or just very, very, very sensitive subjects, a big part of it is being able to gain trust of an interview subject, to talk to them, to create a relationship. Right now, I know you haven't been there too long, but whether it's you who've done one of these kind of stories or someone else at your station, do you know how are people doing that right now when all of the interactions aren't at their house or you can't actually physically meet them, but it's being done this way? How are people trying to, I guess, gain the trust of an interview subject?
Yeah, I would say it's still putting in an effort. It just looks different now. So I actually, one of like the local leaders here for like a lot of, it's for a group called Black Hands Universal. It's one of like the Black Lives Matter activist groups. His name's Harry, and he works with Phoebe Brown a lot. Some of you have interviewed her, but just, showing up to anything outdoors or supporting them, like not necessarily supporting them, but showing you're listening online. So one of them, there's no thing too small that they're doing. So they have this. So Harry, for example, with Black Hands Universal, they organize some of the bigger protests here sometimes, and they work with a lot of groups that way. And they work with the Southside Community Center and these stories that we're doing, the Ithaca Voice is doing, that everyone is doing. But then I also saw on Harry's Facebook page that he just picked up like one of those outdoor tents and put it outside the Department of Social Services in Ithaca, and just started giving out free smoothies to homeless people every morning, or every Saturday morning. He did it for weeks over the summer, and he just did it, and there was no reason for it. And then people started volunteering, and I was like, I messaged him and I was like, hey, can I come by? And I pitched it to my boss, and I was like, listen, it's not connected to anything. I know it might not matter, but like, it's really cool that someone's just doing this. And so she was like, you can have like 30 seconds. And I was like, fine, like I'll take it. And so from that, he knew that I was listening. So then a few weeks later, he was able to work with the city to transition it to now at those smoothie tents. They're now giving soup, by the way, because it's fall. But they were able to hire local teens that couldn't get a job in the pandemic and actually pay them to work at the smoothie tent to give free smoothies for the community. People were donating food, and it was becoming this community event. And so he messaged me first when that happened. And so right now there's a lot of posts going on with like Southside Community Center, and he messaged me and he said, hey, listen, just showing up in those little ways and show that you're paying attention, or reaching out to things you're interested in. So Second Wind Cottage is a really cool organization that I volunteered with for years when I was at IC. And I was just like, I wonder what they're up to. So I gave him a call and I was like, what's going on? Like, can I come by? Like, what are your projects? And they were like, actually, we haven't told anyone else about this yet because we weren't sure, but because like, you're asking because you've tried to reach us a few times. There's this guy who was homeless and he's leaving us in a few weeks. And he actually just, because he got promoted to a job paying $80,000 a year. So he's moving from homeless. He was living in a tent 5 years ago, lived with us, and now he's moving up, and we want you to do it. And I was like, yeah, like, of course. But, so really just making those little connections. And now, like the guy who did the smoothie stand, apparently, I don't even know the story fully. It's still like kind of unraveling, but he was like, there's, something's going to be happening in the next few weeks. The Ithaca Voice has asked us about it. The Times has asked us about it, but I told everyone to hold off and wait until they can talk to you. Because I gained that trust and I showed, hey, I'm not just here for the story. I'm here because I see what you're trying to do. So just like, it goes with that, like showing your process, showing everything, show that you're a human first, and that we are in a pandemic, and respecting that. Like sometimes it'll happen for the worst and you just have to be patient with it. I had a story that I was really, really excited about, and then right before it, I had a hard time connecting with them, finally connected with them, and then right before the story connected, they had to cancel because they said, hey, actually, it was like a very visual story, and they were like, actually, I want to quarantine because I wanted to visit my sister or whatever it was, and so I'm trying to be really careful, so I don't want to do the story anymore. And I just kind of had to say, okay. But he texted me and said, hey, I might actually have another opportunity in a few weeks. But if I was going to say like, oh no, that sucks, like he probably would have just been frustrated and not have done it. So just using your patience and seeing other people's issues as well as working kind of with what you got.
All right. And another part of, you know, a lot of people's minds right now in the college experience and all that are something that you seem to have figured out pretty well, getting all these different internships and getting connections in kind of the professional space while you're in school. So what has been your strategy? What do you think is the best way to go about getting these internships and getting these connections while you're in school?
I would say cold calling is your friend. And I mean that like not necessarily calling them, but cold calling of like searching up Ithaca alum on LinkedIn and just messaging who you see that might be related or might be somewhere that you want. And also with that, thinking ahead. So people love students and people love talking to you when they don't think you want anything from them. So if you message someone and you're like, hey, I'd love an internship there, can you help me? They're going to be a little, sometimes that'll work and that's great. But it's sometimes very helpful just to say, hey, I did this recent project. I'd love if you took a look, and kind of build that relationship. And then a little bit when you have a relationship, say, hey, I'm also, you know, I'm applying for the internship there. Like not hiding it, but just showing that you are interested genuinely in what they do and not just for the connections they have as well. But using all of those connections, and especially in our industry, just talking to everyone and taking any opportunity you can. So there was like, I've done like weird things as well, but you never know who knows someone else. I worked at the local Spectrum station down here. It's like the Pegasus station. That's not like a real station. It's like a public, I interned at it like my freshman year. The Magic Man works there, if that gives you any context for where that is.
It's public access television.
His YouTube channel is a wild place. He does lives on Instagram. Just a strange guy. There's some articles about him. Just a weird guy. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, so certainly a strange place. But I was like, you know what? It's TV, and maybe I didn't get the best jobs on ICTV because I'm a freshman and whatever, and so I'm gonna do it. And it was like such a weird time. It was like a roundtable discussion, but it didn't really make sense. And like they would actually just show pictures that they had laminated of like women they liked. It was very weird. It was bad. And then I never went back, but it was fine for like a minute. It was just like experience. But then the public access station lady who owned the station but didn't know the shows very well was like, oh, I know this person who does this. And just putting your time in, and then that went on my resume. So I said like I was a director of a roundtable show, and just, you know, hitting the ground and saying you're not too big for any job, I think is kind of the main message I'm trying to say here. You're not too good for anything. In the Olympics, as flashy and awesome as it sounds and as it was, most nights I was taking the trash out as well. Literally taking I would walk it to the dumpster at like 2 a.m. and it was freezing. But I was also at the Olympics, so you are not too big for any job. And if you come at things with that attitude, with like being humble, and just, you know, eagerness, people are gonna see that and people are gonna know your true intentions. And I think that's really helpful when applying for anything. But I think personal connections with that help a lot. So if you're applying to Spotify, look for like Ithaca College alum Spotify and be like, hey, I just applied here, would love to talk to you over coffee. That's where Zoom helps a little bit even, because you can say, can we like get coffee over Zoom? So you're still making that more personal connection, but you don't have to travel to see them.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that was all the prepared questions me and Jay had, but I guess we could open the floor. Does anyone have any questions, or Sarah, do you have any final thoughts? Skylar?
Hi, Sarah. So I'm a senior, which is really scary, and I'm a little worried about just like the job search and the pandemic and all of that. So I guess I'm just wondering like what you think the best process might be, what, you know, like real material is going to look a lot different with all the Zoom interviews and like the Zoom anchor clips. So just like, what is your advice for kind of like making it look as good as possible and like trying to get a job?
Yeah. I definitely felt that in a little bit of a different sense, but like, you know, I had a job like that, like was going to be like one of my like dream out of college jobs. And it was pretty much lined up, just didn't get the offer yet. And then COVID hit and then it went away. And so a lot of things changed. And so kind of your expectations might change, you know, things are they are different now. But I think if you show, and what I've been told too, is just show that you're willing to try and think outside of the box and you have that drive and you're trying to be creative. That really, from what people, I've talked to people about, that is what shines through, is that you're trying. And that's really, especially what news directors are caring about in the pandemic, is like, okay, like they're going to try, they're going to get creative around this and they're passionate about it. So if you could do like even a fake Facebook Live that you put in your reel, but it's in person and it's you by yourself, like standing somewhere, like you did it, and that's, you know, real footage in person. Or if you can make one of those Zoom packages, you know, have that creative B-roll or your own graphics or something like that, that's also an added bonus. Or right now is one of, even though it's a pandemic, it's one of the craziest times to be in news because so much is happening all of the time. There's never a shortage of ideas, because if you're a shortage of ideas, it's how is COVID affecting blank, because it's everywhere. And finding those emotional things that maybe someone might not have thought of, or finding ways that different people are impacted, both good and bad. Finding the little niche angles people might not have thought of or might have missed, I think are also big wins. But really, as far as like actually applying or like posting, just share your content as much as possible, I would say. But right now, just being so fresh out of applying and in that market, a lot of people, news directors, anywhere, most employers, they just don't know. They're trying to plan, but they just don't know. And so they're not going to have a clear answer because they don't know exactly what's going to happen. But so like, just keep surfing, keep tabs on things, share your content. And then like, when it gets closer is when you can start being like, okay, here is what I know is available.
Anyone else?
I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, I have a question. So I wanted to know, how do you stay motivated during this time? I know it's a little off topic, but I'm just curious.
No, that's very important. I just went to a virtual conference actually, and that was like a whole session, was like not getting burnt out under COVID too, because it can be draining. And, you know, we're reporters because we want to get out there and we want to do the story and meet people. And it's so frustrating to sit here and look at my computer and not be able to film the things. What really helps me is just thinking about who I'm doing this for. And it's for the community and, you know, who's watching. And if I get like a viewer message or a text or someone saying like, thank you so much for doing this, like I didn't know, or like this resource really helped me, to me that like really makes it worth it and really makes it helpful. Or changing perspectives or willing to have a talk really helps. And just like talking to people who are passionate about what they do, you know, that always like kind of fires me up a little bit. So really finding the little things. I think you got to search for it. And some days like, yeah, I feel kind of burnt out, like, okay, I don't want to do another, like, how does COVID affect blank story, but like looking for things that interest you, and like I view it again as like a challenge of like, okay, how am I going to get around this thing and make it exciting? So something that I'm still trying to like land, pun not intended, but so my story I've pitched recently is about how like private airports are actually like flourishing under COVID, private airlines, because people feel it's safer. And so I finally got in touch with one of like the private airline companies here. And I was like, can I go in one, like in the sky? And so even though it's another one of those COVID stories, he was like, I think I can take you up. If we're both wearing a mask, like it'll be short, it'll be fine. So finding the little things that you're like, okay, I have that to look forward to, or I have that I can do in next week, planning ahead.
Yeah. I wasn't expecting an answer like that. That was really, really helpful. So thank you.
I don't know what you're expecting. I don't know. But I would say also big important is like take the time for yourself. In March, when the pandemic first hit and I lost like senior year and the job I thought I was going to have and like all of that, I couldn't look at the news. Like I couldn't. And I was like, but I love the news. It's important to take that time for yourself, take that break if you need it. Like, so important. It's why it's there. All of you are students. All of you understand each other. Erica and Jay are humans. So if you're like, hey, like there's a lot going on, like we're in a pandemic. If you need a minute, take a minute. It's not the end. Like, it's going to be okay. But take care of yourself first is definitely the more important thing, because you're going to burn out that much faster if you just try and plow through it.
Hey, Sarah.
Go, Jay.
I got a question. Sorry. So I'm reporting for the first time ever for Newswatch this semester. So I'm just trying to figure out, how do I get my feet wet? How do I get started? What's like the first couple steps to take? I'm in Queens, New York. I'm not in Ithaca. I'm nowhere close to that. So it makes things a little bit different. Obviously for you get to go to these places. I can't. I'm in Queens. I'm not going anywhere. So how do I get started? I really need to figure that out.
Yeah, it can be so hard to start in a place where you're like, okay, I'm barely in this community and now I'm supposed to report on it, and I'm not even like difficult. But I would try and join, like try and be as virtually present in Ithaca. I don't know how Erica and Jay are structuring things, is like if you're covering other places as well or sticking more to Ithaca, well, that's up to them. But try and be as virtually present as possible. So you can, on Facebook, there's a setting where you can set your location to see what events are happening at that location. So just scroll through those and see what's going on there, and maybe you could like message someone who's in charge. The Downtown Ithaca website has a lot of what's going on. So you can always look there to see if things are coming up. And just kind of to get started, even start small, and just it's part of that connections of you don't know who knows someone. So even if you wanted to start with, like, let's say this is kind of a story my coworker just did, was that a lot of archaeology professors and people who would normally be traveling right now to be like looking at other countries and things can't go anywhere. So they're looking in Ithaca. So they're having a lot of discoveries here now, actually. So talk to like a professor at Ithaca College or a professor at Cornell, or maybe you're interested in, that's kind of the good part of COVID, of like COVID affects everything. So you can talk to any professor, any subject, and just be like, hey, how has COVID impacted, what you're doing, or what students should expect for their profession? And that could be how you start. And then at the end of the interview, be like, is there anything else you think deserves coverage right now, or isn't getting enough coverage, or something that I should be aware of? And 9 times out of 10, they'll say something that they don't even think they want to say, but I get my best sound bites then, but also I get good leads. They'll say something very off the cuff that I'm like, wait, what? Like today I was interviewing an attorney just to break down some legal jargon, and at the end he was like, actually, yeah, I have a pretty big lawsuit that's finishing up in a few months. And I was like, So just making sure you're asking, being like, is there anything else you want to tell me? Maybe. But start with whatever's in your reach. And that's kind of, Jay knows this. I had like a podcast for WICB that was literally, I called from a phone book a random person and just made a story about it. And I did a whole series that way. So just kind of anyone is a story, anything is a story. So whatever's in your reach, and just connect and go from there and see like who's connecting you to who.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I like your energy. Sorry for these long answers, everyone.
So in your stand-up earlier, you had no mask on, but if you were in an area, let's say, where they required you to wear a mask, and even if you said like it's only for 5 seconds, they said you still need to wear a mask, or you're interviewing a subject and need to wear a mask, what one would you recommend for people doing these reporting?
I don't think there's a clear-cut mask that works best. A plain black one looks really nice. I have one that's hot pink and reversible black, so it's fun and nice. But what I would recommend that I'm actually looking to invest in is they sell like, it's like a plastic, it almost looks like a guard, and it's just like little plastic stripes that keeps your mask like a little bit away from your mouth. I would say that's very helpful, because then you're not breathing in your mask while you're trying to talk. I think they're pretty cheap on Amazon. I'm looking into them myself. Yeah, but I'd say just simple. Your mask shouldn't be distracting from what you're saying, because it is half your face. I don't go on air with the hot pink side. You know what I mean? Like your mask isn't the focus of your story. It's what you're trying to say.
I have a question. Even though, like Jaden said, I'm not in Ithaca, I'm in upstate New York, so I'm on the other side of the state from him. So even though, like, let's say I'm not able to travel to Ithaca, can I try and like use my outside settings even where I'm living, even though I'm not in Ithaca? Or is that a way I can sort of try and influence things even though it's not like in Ithaca? Like, will people notice that?
Yeah, so you totally can. A lot of my stand-ups sometimes are just in front of generic bush, or like generic tree, or generic wall. Like, it could be anywhere, and you could just, not say anything about it. Or you could look at this almost too as an opportunity of like having reporters everywhere. So if you are somewhere else, you could, you could say like, hey, like, I might be in Syracuse, but the effects of whatever's happening in Ithaca are being felt here. And kind of tie it reverse locally, I guess. But yeah, no, any kind of background works, any location works. I think it's better to be able to have something physically on camera than like having no stand-up or something, but being in the wrong location. So generic backgrounds are great. No one will question it. Yeah, I'd say just go for it. Like that's silence.
Any questions? Sarah, any final thoughts?
You're all gonna do great. It's the fact that you are here is a great sign, like means that you're gonna be fine. And the fact that you are signing up to do a virtual news anything or virtual extracurriculars means that you are willing, and you do have that drive, and you want to do something. And again, like those intentions, they're always gonna shine through. People can always kind of see that, and that you care. And that's kind of really the end. Just like remember why you're doing it. Remember that this is, yes, it's for your benefit as students to become better journalists, but also it's to share information like with the Ithaca community, and like to bring up topics that people might not know. And people are really trusting of students and love students, especially in Ithaca. So you do have that to your advantage. And just, kind of remember why you're doing it, and it'll be helpful, but also the fact that you are doing it. And it's really hard to be doing things from home, especially because on extracurricular time, you know, in a pandemic. And so make sure you're giving yourself credit for that, because it's really great that you're doing that and that, you know, you want to keep doing this. So just make sure to give yourself some credit in that, and it's gonna be great. And also feel free to send me anything you want. If you want something critiqued every once in a while, I don't have a lot of free time, but like if you send it to me, I'll definitely get back to you. It just might take me a little while. Anything you want critiqued, any advice you want, I'm totally open. Right now I'm doing the same. I'm like emailing random people on LinkedIn or like from a conference or mentors all the time. So I'd love to do that for you guys as well. But be careful what you wish for, because one time, Eric knows this too, like Mark asked me for notes, or someone asked me for notes, and I was like, okay, and I gave him like a whole list of notes. So I'm gonna like be honest with you, so take it or leave it. But yeah, I'm open for you guys if you want advice or anything. So yeah.
Well, thank you, Sarah, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Very appreciate it. If you guys have, I'll share, I recorded this, I will share it with everyone. So that way, if you want to go back and hear anything she said, whatever, we'll share that. I'll also share the links to the 2 stories she referenced with you guys as well, so you guys can watch them. If you have any questions, me and Jay are here. Anything you guys need, we are here for you. But thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate it. And everyone have a great night.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Bye.
You too.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, guys.